welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Sarah Easter Collins is a writer and artist. She grew up in Kent, England, and studied at Exeter University before moving to Botswana and later Thailand and Malawi, where she taught art. Sarah now lives on Exmoor with her husband and 2 dogs. She's the mother to a wonderful son, a graduate of the Curtis Brown Creative Novel Writing course, and she holds a diploma in creative writing from Oxford University. Things Don't Break on Their Own is her first novel. Sarah Easter Collins, thank you so much for joining today. I am so excited to talk to you about your debut novel, the amazing literary thriller, Things Don't Break on Their Own. In a starred review, Booklist says Things Don't Break on Their Own is a gripping book about families, loyalty, lies, and love that is at once heartwarming and horrifying. In another starred review, Bookpage says Sarah Easter Collins goes straight for the gut and the heart. Things Don't Break on Their Own is a rare treasure, bursting with emotion and built to last. Author Karen Slaughter says a captivating, haunting, and twisty story that explores the nature of loss and trauma and the tricks that our memories play on us. A terrific debut from a promising talent. Author Alice Feeney says cleverly crafted and deeply moving, this beautiful book is a genuine page-turner. It was original, it was gripping, it was shocking, and I loved it. And one more, author AJ Finn says, this is the one, the next must read, must recommend, must discuss, must reread novel. A miraculous literary thriller, shocking, daring, moving, haunting, infinitely rewarding. This, I hope, is the future of suspense writing. So with that, what can you tell us about Things Don't Break on Their Own?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And Things Don't Break on Their Own is a story about sisters. It's a story about hidden histories. It's a story about how unreliable our memories can be.
Mhm.
And it's also very much a story about, well, it's got an explosive dinner party at the heart of it. It's got a missing sister in it.
Mhm.
And it's very much a story about female friendship and sisterhood in all its forms.
Mhm. What was the spark that started this story for you, that got this one going?
I had the opening scenes at Robin's house in my mind for a very long time. I have placed her family home very much near where I live. So I should explain I live in the middle of a national park. We are surrounded by wild ponies and wild deer and a lot of open space.
Mhm.
And I mean, I can literally walk all day without seeing another person. So
Wow.
it's wild and it's very lovely. And I put Robin's family home here, and for a long time I had those sort of opening scenes in my head, and Robin and her family felt very fully realized to me as characters. You know, I had the scene with the pot breaking and then being mended, and I had this sense of this lovely, warm family,
Mhm.
but I wasn't entirely sure what to do with it. And for a long time, I was thinking that it was actually Robin's brother who was going to go missing. And
Oh.
then I realized that the reason I was getting stuck is because that would never happen. Robin's family would never allow somebody to go missing. And if they went missing, they would find them. There is
Mhm.
such love and warmth in that family. They're a family who are, you know, messy and fun and talkative, and they get things wrong, but they mend them again.
Mhm.
And and then I went to a dinner party where there was a man there who basically dominated the entire evening with talking, and it spoke so loudly and so forcefully that actually nobody else could get a word in. And he ignored every single woman at that table,
Wow.
including his wife, and spoke to one other man. And I went away from that thinking, wow, how fascinating. He didn't find out anything about the rest of us at all. And
Mm.
then I thought, at a gathering like that, everybody's bringing their own stories and their own histories. And if you have a meeting of people where nobody actually knows each other, everybody's got these extraordinary stories. And I began thinking, well, what would happen if two of those histories were going to clash? If some of those strangers, they were bringing things to the table that actually somehow joined up with each other.
Mhm.
And also, I've realized that if anybody was going to go missing, somebody was going to go missing from a family like that, of that man, in other words,
Mhm.
not from Robin's family at all. And then suddenly I realized, oh, hang on, I've got a whole story here. I've got this family, and now I've got this family, and I can join those two up somehow and make a whole story. And at that point, I just almost could not stop writing. I was getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning because the story was sort of just pouring out of me. And it just all just sort of happened really from that point. Yeah.
That's
Things
so
came to
exciting. That idea of just having the story figured out and getting up because you can't help it, but just to write. Is your normal routine to get up early in the morning and write, or was that just how it sort of happened for this particular
I couldn't
novel?
sleep. I was waking up, really early in the morning and just tossing and turning. I had whole conversations going through my heads and scenes and things I wanted to get down. And I don't know if I'm sure this is actually common for a lot of people. I If I don't write something down when I think of it, it can go,
Mhm,
especially at that
mhm,
time in the morning. It's like a dream almost, it's half
mhm.
dreaming, half thinking. And you realize if you don't go and write this down, maybe this exact phrase, which is so right or feels so right now, will just disappear.
Yeah,
So I I would just get up and come and write.
I love that. The novel is certainly gripping and propulsive and horrifying and all of the things that we heard people say in the blurbs. But as you mentioned, it also has female relationships and sisterly bonds at its core. What draws you to writing about strong female relationships?
Yes, I did not want to write any ditzy women. I wanted
Mhm.
all my women. I mean, I was happy to have them damaged. I was happy to have them making mistakes, but I really wanted them to be intelligent, inventive, creative, determined, to have some sort of core. So, and I mean, Willa is probably the most damaged of the people in the story,
Mm.
but actually she also has a core of something quite strong inside her and a determination to keep going. So I wanted to write women who will own their own choices, and also women who will support and advocate for other women, because for me that feels far truer than writing women who are at odds with each other.
Yeah.
I i feel that actually most women are highly supportive of other women. And I mean, there can things can happen where they fall out and things go wrong and they make mistakes. But I think mainly women are actually on board with looking after and helping and protecting other women. And I wanted that my characters to be those sort of women. I think female friendship is hugely important.
Mhm. Another thing that you play with, and that you mentioned here is memory. What fascinates you about memory?
Well, I don't know how this started happening, but I suddenly thought, okay, it would be great if Liv was a psychologist, and it would be great, in terms of the story, if this was an element of it. And then I started reading up on memory and thought, oh, this is fascinating. Hang on a minute, this really fits in terms of the story. And And I mean, the wonderful thing about writing now is that you have the whole of the internet right in front of you and to research, and you know that you may not know something, but you can find it out pretty quickly. So I started delving into memory and realizing, you know, reading up on explicit and implicit memories and the difference between those things and how we formulate memories and how our memories can trick us too into, you know, thinking or remembering things that actually weren't really there. And I, having talked to friends about this, people have said, oh, yeah, you know, actually, my mother and her sister, when they get together, they will both insist something happened to them, and the other one will be saying, no, no, that happened to me.
Mhm.
And I think that's quite fascinating that we can be absolutely convinced, or we can completely forget things. So,
Yeah.
and you know, I've had conversations with friends when I've said, "Do you remember this?" And nope, it's a complete blank. Or they've said the same to me. So, you know, we are, and of course, we are continually bombarded by things that are happening in our lives. So, what are we picking out to take away with us? And what are we just letting go? And how does that happen and why? And I began getting really fascinated by this whole
Mhm.
idea. And it made me really wish I'd studied psychology. My goodness, there's so much there that would be fascinating to delve into further.
Yeah. And you're not just using memory in theme or plot, it's actually woven into the structure of the novel. There are scenes that are repeated from different points of view. Can you talk about your decision to do that and how you made that work? Yeah.
I made a decision that I wanted. Really early on, I thought I'm going to write the dinner party scene just for
Mhm.
fun because I had it in my head and I wanted to get it down. And I suddenly realized, oh, it works well at the beginning of the story.
Mhm.
And then, as you know, this scene is repeated throughout the book from different people's points of view. And what I realize is that because we are all essentially, when you're writing the first person, you're essentially writing an unreliable narrator because what else can they be? They have to be,
Mhm.
because everything we see and perceive is going to be different from the person sitting next to us, because something that is important to me won't be important to them. I might be picking up on how this person is behaving over here to this person because I have an invested relationship with that person.
Mhm.
So I think at a gathering like that, everybody's going to be seeing and witnessing and remembering different things. And so for me, writing the dinner party scene was actually a lot of fun because I was able to have different narrators remember different things and actually put different uh, bits of dialogue into different characters' mouths each time. And that was also very important because, of course, what I didn't want to do is repeat the same scene each time. I
Mhm.
wanted each time, each retelling of a scene that is repeated to actually have something fresh and different about it. So the dinner party is not the only scene that's repeated from a different point of view. Actually, also the visit to Robin's house is told both in Robin's perspective and in Willa's.
Mhm.
Um, but I found that fascinating that actually I could play with that, with this idea of the essentially the Rashomon effect. You know the
Mhm.
Rashomon effect from the film Rashomon,
I'm
which
not sure. Will you explain it?
yes, so Rashomon is a 1950s film by
Mhm.
a Japanese director called Akira Kurosawa. And it's really in this story there's I mean some key terrible events happen. There's several witnesses, but each of the witnesses tells when they're asked to recount what happened, tells a completely different version of events. And it's a version of events that sort of tries to put their own selves in the best possible light.
Mm, mhm, mhm,
They've all got an invested reason to lie about what happened, in other words.
mhm.
And this has become known as the Rashomon effect,
Oh,
where and it's actually been quoted in court cases. So the Rashomon effect is, I've written this down so I tell you
yeah.
exactly. In storytelling, the subjectivity of perception by recollection is known as the Rashomon effect. So
Okay.
it's is about subjectivity, yes. And I realized I could use that effect in the story. In other words, that essentially it makes us into unreliable narrators when we are telling a story from our own perspective. But I think also in having a number of different first person storytellers, you're inviting the audience, not necessarily, or the reader, not necessarily to decide whose story is true, as to have some empathy for each person's perspective.
Mhm.
So you don't necessarily have to say, well, that person got it right and that person got it wrong. But that's what they saw, that's what they felt, that's what mattered to them. So, and that's maybe asking the reader to walk in their shoes a bit.
It's so interesting because I'm thinking about, as we're talking about this, when I was reading, it's also kind of is participatory for the reader, because when I was reading, I would read, the scene told from a different perspective. And I caught myself thinking, hang on a second, is that what happened in the first time? And I was like flipping back and comparing the different scenes. So I
I
also
love
didn't trust
that.
myself, It felt like something was a little bit off, but that so you can see how, wait, do I remember that correctly just from reading it, and
I
experience
love that
that
then
way.
the reader becomes an additional witness.
Yes, yes, exactly. How did you decide which points of view you wanted to include?
Oh, goodness. I think that just almost evolved naturally. Uh, at the beginning, I had obviously two voices, and then it felt very natural to bring in a third, which
Mhm.
I think I won't say too much more about that. But it got to a point where, okay, now she needs to tell her story.
Mhm.
So uh, the yes, I think it just evolved really. I hadn't, I should say, maybe plotted this story out properly. I had the beginning point. I had a great sense of where I was going. I had, I realized there was a story there, but I didn't sit down and say, okay, right now I'm going to get this out and this will happen here and this will happen here. And in fact, my writing method, I suppose you could just describe almost like cell division. So I had this cell and then it produced this cell and then another cell appeared in the middle of them and things were popping out like this. So, and gradually something linear appeared. Does that
Ah,
make sense?
yes, and I love that. I've never heard it described exactly like that before. Which reminded me of something that I wanted to ask you a little bit earlier when we were talking about the scenes from the different, like the dinner party, for example, that you wrote from the different perspectives. Did you write the scene from one perspective and then immediately try writing it from a different perspective, and then, or how did that work?
No, I was writing in a linear way, so I
Mhm.
did skip ahead. But when I wrote the second dinner party scene, which at that point was, yes, from Willa's point of view,
Mhm.
um, I realized, oh my goodness, this is a lot of fun. I'm having, all right, okay, what did I say there? Okay, well, I'm not going to say the same thing, so I'll say this here. And
Mhm.
actually, I realized I was having a lot of fun writing a scene that was the same but different.
Mhm. Mhm.
But no, I didn't write one. Though when I got to the end, I definitely had all these other tabs open so I could refer. Oh, okay, what was going on there?
A lot of open tabs.
A lot of open tabs. I think four at one
Oh,
point.
wow. You explore different forms of art in the novel, pottery in particular, and a Japanese pottery technique called kintsugi. Am I saying that correctly?
I think so, but
Okay.
I might not be the right person to ask. But that's
Can you talk about that a little bit, this particular technique and how it works
so.
within
This
the
is
story?
a really beautiful Japanese technique where a broken thing is mended with the cracks deliberately made visible, and not just made visible, but actually then painted with, or in fact brushed with a precious metal. So it could be brushed with silver or gold or platinum or copper.
Mm.
And traditionally it's made with tree sap. The pieces are joined together with tree sap, and then they're brushed so that you get these lines of something very precious, which are the cracks. So
Mm.
it's saying philosophically that actually, first of all, to mend something is an act of love.
Mm.
So, and I love that so much, that to mend something makes it stronger and more beautiful and better, which first of all acknowledges, I think, in a human point of view, it acknowledges human weakness
Mhm.
and says we get things wrong, we're fallible, we're going to mess up, we will get things wrong, that is human nature.
Mhm.
But then saying, but actually, if we put it back together again in a way that is beautiful and stronger, uh, then it will be better than it was before. And I love the philosophy behind that idea, that it first of all acknowledges a break, and
Mm.
then it makes that break strong and beautiful by mending
Yeah.
it. And I just think, and actually, examples are just beautiful. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but it's such a beautiful way of. I mean, a kintsugi pot is just stunning. They're lovely to look at. They have these, lines running through them. Very precious. Yeah.
There are also a lot of animals in this story. I'm thinking of the baby bird.
Ah,
There's a heartbreaking reference to the first dog in space who shares a name with the missing sister. One of the characters has this kind of encyclopedic knowledge of animals. I know you're an animal lover. Why did you find it important to weave animals into this very human story?
and again, this is something that sort of evolved with, but especially with Leica's character.
Mm.
And I mean, I have long sort of been rather appalled by the treatment of Leica the space dog. And but also the reason I chose that name is because I wanted to convey how we hold information in our minds that is not always particularly nice.
Mhm.
So I mean, like the space dog, if you Google images of her, you find this happy little smiling dog, and you can buy, cartoons of her, and you can buy little plastic rockets with little plastic dogs in,
Can
and
you
it's a
explain a little bit about her story for those who
yeah.
don't
So
know?
she was, I mean, she was trained in a way that was really, what we know about it is really very cruel, and the journey she was making into space, they always knew was going to be one way. So she was never coming back from that. And yet, she's sort of like this, oh, here's this hero little dog. And actually, of course, a hero is something a human can be. It's not something an animal can ever choose to be, because they would never choose that. To be a hero is a, a specific choice that you have to make as an individual. So I think there's this reworking of history there. And I think that we can very much, I think as humans, we tend to do that with animals a lot.
Mhm.
The way animals are kept and reared and slaughtered. And um, I have I don't know, I'm an animal lover, I suppose. And yeah, so there's a number of animals, and maybe a plea for kindness in there towards the way we treat animals.
And the decision to use the same name for our missing sister as a space dog, when did that come to you?
Actually, really early on, because I, as I said, what I wanted to really convey was this sense that um, we're holding different things in our minds. So they've chosen this little name, but actually, what the name really conveys is this sense that there's another story there, and the story behind that name is actually not nearly as pleasant as we like to maybe make out.
Yeah.
And I felt that that is very much the case with Leica and her family, that there's a front that they're presenting to the world where, they seem to have it all in many ways,
Mhm.
but that actually behind that is something that is a lot less pleasant.
I read an interview where you said something that I thought was so cool. I'm excited to hear you talk a little more about it. You said that you believe readers are generally pretty clued up on how thrillers work. And so they're actively seeking out hints, and you like to play with that expectation. So, how do you play with it?
Okay, well, there was one point in the story is actually at one of the dinner party scenes
Mhm.
where I know that people will be looking for something.
Mhm.
So I know I am doing a bit of misdirecting in the very first dinner party scene where I'm sort of almost like pointing the finger very subtly of it could be her. She could look at. But, but actually, I wanted to do that so subtly that the reader would think I was trying to hide it.
Uh-huh.
so, so I was trying to write in a way both where I point the finger a little bit, but also hope that the reader will think, "Oh, she doesn't think she think I haven't picked that up."
It really does work well. You do such a good job of it. And I found, as I was reading, I kept thinking, oh, am I is this supposed to be leading me down, or am I on the right track? It's great.
But I do think readers are clued up. I think readers
Mhm.
will be actively looking uh, for the answers. I mean, don't we all? And we love that
Yeah.
moment where we think we've patched it all together. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And to play with that is great. In addition to being a writer, you're a painter. How do you think that your painting informs your writing and vice versa?
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, I mean, on a very obvious level, you start with a blank page to get something down there. Um, my my painting feels to me a lot more relaxed than writing. When I'm writing, I'm so blinkered and I can't have any noise. have no idea how anybody writes in a cafe or with music. I could not do that. My focus is absolutely total, whereas for me, painting is a lot more relaxing and I'm listening to an audio book or music or something like that. But with painting, I would say that I have a I work in mixed media, and
Mm.
I will very happily take. And I also work on board rather than on paper because
Mhm.
I actually think board you can throw more at it. And so I will quite happily take a board to my sink and wash off half of what I have got on there because I know I will have put some interesting stuff, and actually maybe some of that's got covered up as I kept working on it, and I like to wash down through the layers and think, oh, that's quite interesting. And I
Mm.
suppose I'm doing the same with writing too.
Mhm.
With writing, there's a story that you begin with, and then you start peeling away maybe the layers and thinking, well,
Mhm.
what's this person's history? And why is this person acting like that? Well, this person's acting like that because of something that's happened in the past. So I've just got to, oh, let me just wash this bit off here and I'll see
Mhm.
what's happened in their past a bit. And so I suppose there are similar techniques in terms of looking at the history of something.
Yeah.
The histories we carry with us are all important, and it's there in my painting and it's there in my writing too.
Yes, the layering and what's
Yeah.
buried.
Yes, what's
Just a
buried.
couple of layers underneath. What's just under that surface.
Yeah.
You are also an avid traveler.
Oh, yeah.
How do you think travel affects your writing?
Oh, um, know. Well, I've worked in a number of countries, and I think in all these places you meet so many fascinating people with some such different backgrounds, and you listen to stories, and I'm sure that is an element of it, and also in terms of maybe environments. So
Mhm.
um, I think having a range of places to call upon in terms of how things feel as much as how they look, and
Mhm.
how they make you feel. I have become quite an avid note taker in places of writing down plants that I see, or a hare running across a field, or uh, what the light looks like, what it smells like. I've become, quite, yes, quite the note taker. Yeah.
I love that idea of how something feels versus
Mm.
how it looks and how a place feels, as opposed to just how it looks. Have you always been a writer? How did you come to writing?
I um I have, I used to write a lot as a child, as a small child, write, invent stories and things, and even send them off to, yeah, magazines in the hope that something would be published, and of course, never, nothing ever was. Um, but and for a long time, it was almost like a secret, just I think I've raised a family, and had a job for years. I was teaching,
Mm.
and I think when you come to something slightly later in life, there's a sense of, is this something I can really do, or something that I want to do? And is there an audience for my voice and what I want to say?
Mm.
And um, and I think the older you get, possibly the harder it is to give yourself permission to do something like that.
Mhm.
And um, I in 2018, I did a short 10-week course called Getting Started with Creative Writing. And for me, that was a really, really important thing, because I felt not just that. I mean, two things happened. First of all, I knew it answered the question for me of, yes, I really, really want to write. Just I love this. I realized I absolutely loved crafting sentences and choosing the exact right word
Mhm.
to express what I wanted to say. And the other thing that happened was, I felt I had permission. I felt it gave me permission to do this. I thought, okay, this is, uh, yeah, I can do this. I can have a go, and
Mhm.
you're allowed to. You're allowed to
Mhm.
have this second life, sort of thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it was a really useful thing for me to do, actually. Yeah.
And then what was the road to publication like for you? So you've enrolled in this course, you figured out that this really is the thing.
And then
Now you're a debut novelist. Where
there was,
fill in the blanks.
in between now and then, there was another novel which I sent out to a number of agents and little presses, and I had a lot of interest, but nobody offered. And then I just thought, oh, I'm gonna write another story. I had other stories bubbling away in the back of my head. I thought, I've got to be doing something right, because people were interested, even though nobody offered. People seemed to be interested, so I'm just gonna start writing. And actually, then of course, I had this idea and the other idea, and it came together, and it all started happening very quickly. So I wrote the first draft of Things Don't Break on Their Own in about 3.5 months, because I was
Wow.
writing so quick.
Wow.
And then I did a second draft, and then at the time I was doing a course with Curtis Brown Creative. So
Mm.
Curtis Brown are a literary agent in London, and they have a creative writing school. And I did the 3-month novel writing course, which was absolutely fantastic and life-changing for me. I mean, first of all, it introduced me to this group of wonderful other writers. And I suddenly realized I had a group of writer friends who, were so inspiring and dedicated, and their writing was phenomenal. And suddenly I had these, 15 people that there were in our class to draw upon, to talk to, and the buzz was phenomenal, and I loved it. And then the other wonderful thing that happened is at the end of that course, they put everybody's first 3,000 words into an anthology, which they sent around to their agents.
Oh, wow.
And as if by a sort of miracle, I had a message from somebody who to me was honestly a dream agent, and who I had never approached in the past, because I just thought, oh, she's just too wonderful, almost like, untouchable. And she asked to see the full manuscript, and then at the end of the conversation, she said to me, "Oh, I'm going to send you over a you know, something." And I rang a friend and said, "I think I might have just been offered representation. I'm not gonna, I think." And it was the miracle thing. So she and I worked together. She had some brilliant ideas, and she offered me representation in November, and then I basically worked with her ideas up to the next summer. We went to submission to publishers in the September, and wonderfully, it all happened very quickly. So I'm so grateful for all those opportunities. It's been incredible for me, and a really, really lovely journey. I've really enjoyed every moment of it.
What do you know now that you wish you had known before you started this journey?
Oh gosh, so much. I have learned so much from the process of being edited, and um, and to work with. So I have an editor in the US and an editor in the UK,
Mm.
plus my agent. And to have people who are absolutely on my side, and who want the novel to be the best it could be, and to have these fabulous ideas of, think about this, think about that, has been phenomenal. So what would I like to have known in advance? That that it was really worth pursuing, and that actually, yeah, sort of, I know, maybe dreams can come true. That
Oh.
it feels. I think you have to keep going if you want to write. That for a long time, there's a long period where there's no sense that it will definitely happen. But if you are writing because you love to write, and that's what I really learned, that I loved to write, and I loved it. And I
Mhm.
really do mean that, for me, writing is an absolute joy. Um, and I think that's what I'm glad it got somewhere.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense.
There was no guarantee of that happening, and it feels really quite wonderful that it has, and I've been so grateful for that.
That sort of rolls into what my next question was going to be, which is, what's your best advice for aspiring novelists?
Okay, write in the winter, because the summer you're going to want to be outside. So if you begin writing a novel in October, November, when the weather is grim, then
Mhm.
that seems like a really good time to nail a lot of the work before the spring comes. And I think that actually also editing something is a lot easier than writing something in the first place. And
Mm.
editing is a lot of fun. Going back and rereading something, and picking out what works from that, and making it better and making it stronger, is a really, really lovely process. So I think embracing editing and embracing being edited is um, is something that's important. And also, it is extraordinary what it does to you as a writer, and to your writing, to be sent back repeatedly to a manuscript, to have someone say, go back, look at this bit, look at that bit. And actually you realize, oh, actually, but whilst I'm here, I'm also going to make this bit stronger and better. And so the process of being repeatedly sent back has been really, really important for me. And actually, I would say to anybody who's aspiring is to go back and look again and again and again. Don't get to the end and think, well, that's done. But to think all the time, how can this be better and stronger, and which bits are working, and also to be prepared to get rid of the bits that aren't.
I love that advice. Traditional last question on this podcast. When things don't break on their own is turned into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
Oh, well, I think it's going to have to be something from George Michael, isn't it? Because have you got to that bit in the book? Willie's mother is a huge George Michael fan, or Wham. So yeah, it's going to have to be something by them, I think. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be perfect. And I'll explain that Sarah asked me if I had gotten to that bit in the book yet, because I confessed to her that I was enjoying the book so much I didn't let myself finish because I didn't want to give away spoilers. So now I can't wait to get to the end. Sarah Easter Collins, thank you so much for joining today. It has really been a pleasure getting the chance to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.